What's going on, guys? How are you doing? Welcome to yet another World Football stream here with Bleacher Report. My name's Adrian, aka Rabona TV, over on YouTube. Look, let me level with you right away. It's the international break. I get it. I know. It feels like we just got things started with this season. I mean, unless you're enjoying MLS, then we're right in the thick of it, right? We're right in getting into that playoff push. But if you're talking European football, we just got things started. And then it was just ripped away from us, just like that. Just as things are getting interesting, you're 2, 3 matches in, boom, it's gone. Now we're in the international break. And if you're a US men's national team supporter, which I assume you are, I mean, you're here, right? We may have some hate watchers in the chat. Sure, those always are around, but I assume you're a US men's national team supporter. I assume you're thirsting for content and itching for some positivity from this team after that Gold Cup final loss, after some unconvincing displays under Pochettino. So that's what we're covering today. All things U.S. men's national team, what Poch needs to do to improve things. Maybe not so much getting into the granular of the tactics, but just in general. What would be considered some wins from these friendlies against South Korea and Japan? We'll get into some roster predictions for the World Cup. Only 3, 4 windows away now, among other things. So sit back, enjoy, get involved in the chat, and let's get into it. Let's get into it right away with the how to improve things, right? And I think that what we need to do is, as you can see, this has to be the final experiment with player selection for Mauricio Pochettino. I think that the big disappointment in all of this is that many U.S. men's national team fans thought that this would be the window where we finally see Pochettino's core group, sort of the unveiling of his chosen warriors going into the World Cup, the group that he'll work with. Well, the USA is hosting the World Cup in 2026, and we can only assume that this is not that based on the squad that we're seeing. There are going to be some of the guys that, some are going to make this final roster, of course, but when you look at who was omitted, it's crazy to think that a large portion of them wouldn't make the final squad, right? I mean, surely this cannot be the case. And with that in mind, here's the scary thing that I spoke about just a moment ago when we first got started here. After September, there are only 3 more international windows before the big one, the World Cup in June, that big June-July window, right? October, November, and then March of 2026. That's it before the 2026 World Cup begins in June. It's 1 year in. And it feels like Pochettino has done more testing and tinkering than actually coming to any conclusive results, right? We haven't seen it yet. And it's crazy to think that when he was signed on a year ago, at that time, you had people wondering if that was enough time for him to sort everything out, to figure out this core group, to get them playing under his vision. There will be some grace given to him, not having some key players over the summer, your McKennies, your Pulisic's, for various reasons. But for this window, Poch actually opted for all of these selections. He himself said that this is his last experiment, and hopefully he holds his word there. I mean, look at the names that aren't there. Matt Turner, Zach Stepp. I'll go through them all. I had to write them all out because it was crazy. Anthony Robinson, Joe Scally, Mark McKenzie, Johnny Cardozo, Tanner Tessman, Aidan Morris, Malik Tillman, Brendan Aronson, Ricardo Pepi, Fuller and Balogun, Haji Wright, Brian White, Yunus Musa, and Weston McKennie. Except for Balogun has been added, I believe. Just last minute, he's been added in there. Now, some of these guys are injured, like Tillman. Some are coming back from an injury, so it makes sense. And I mean, that right there, you can make an 11 with all the guys who are omitted. Really. Sport Watcher, do you like Mauricio Pochettino? Now, that's a great question. I will get into that in a bit because let's call me a Mauricio Pochettino skeptic. I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to this guy, and I have been going back to the Tottenham days. But in talking about all these guys that aren't going to be there, this is the thing, right? It's time for the best players, if you do consider some of these guys who aren't there the best players, to gel, to get together, to start playing. With all of this chopping and changing of the squads, the guys who are expected to be regulars haven't had much time together under this new coach, whether it be due to missing the Nations League or Gold Cup matches or injury or down to Pochettino's selections throughout the year that he's been in charge. The top guys haven't played together under their new coach as much as you would like heading into the World Cup. They absolutely need to be together now because Pochettino has made his own job a little more difficult, right? If you're focusing your efforts on guys that you don't really think are going to be there, I mean, let's be real. Pochettino was brought in for this World Cup run, right? His contract ends after the World Cup as of now. So if that's the case, then it feels like a lot of wasting time with players that you know aren't going to be there while your best guys are kind of on holiday. He gave some reasons as, some are settling in with new clubs, some are just starting their season, but a lot of these guys are going to be raring to go, even if it is just for friendlies. So there's absolutely a very, very talented group that the USA has right now. We'll go through my predicted 11 later, but that was tough to come to a conclusion on that 11 as I'm getting sidetracked here. There's so many guys that should be starters, but there's just no room for them. But guys that should be playing together against this really tough opposition in Japan and South Korea, it's a great test for them together, right? And speaking of the snubs here, apparently there's no heads up for a lot of them. And that's this improved communication of it all. I'm not talking about on the pitch. I'm talking about between Pochettino and his players, because that's kind of been a problem throughout Poch's tenure so far. We've heard a lot about this. There seems to be a bit of a disconnect when it comes to player-coach relationships, as Pochettino has notoriously been poor with his communication. He doesn't call players when they aren't making the squad, when they are making the squad. For example, as of May of this year, Serginho Dest hadn't spoken to Mauricio Pochettino yet. I mean, not one time in the, what is that, 8 months from September to May, not one time had he spoken to him. Like, I get it. He's a top talent for this national team. He absolutely should be the starting right back. Even if he is injured, you'd expect the coach to call him, check in, see how he's doing at least one time in that 8 months. I mean, I know Berhalter was a divisive head coach, that's for sure. I'm not gonna defend Berhalter. But just imagine if he had gone 8 months without speaking to one of the top players for the U.S. men's national team. People would not let him get away with that. They would say that that's sloppy man management, etc. So I think that we have to hold Pochettino to the same sort of standard when it comes to that. Even take the Christian Pulisic situation from this past summer, where you'll remember he didn't play the Gold Cup. He opted to not play as he needed time to rest, etc. When Pochettino was asked about this just last week, if he had spoken to Pulisic since then, he said this. No, we didn't talk with Christian. I think there's nothing to talk about. I think everything is behind us, all that happened in the summer, and I think now we need to look forward. So that's not a great look for a relationship between the coach and the U.S. men's national team's biggest difference maker on the pitch. Then you have interviews with Gio Reyna and Joe Scally, both not picked this window, asking them if Pochettino had contacted them about his thought process as to why they weren't being picked. Both of them said that Pochettino had not contacted them. And these are guys that you would assume, maybe Reyna's on the bubble, I don't know, but you would assume are going to be there at the World Cup. So there's a bit of a lack of communication. Now, of course, this is just September window with some friendlies, but some communication between players and the coach amongst guys who likely will be in your World Cup squad certainly doesn't hurt, right? It all adds to this big disconnect that people are seeing between the coach and the players. And that sort of leads into the next part of like, you see it in the performances on the pitch, a disconnect in the coach's ideas and players, because these things are all working against each other, right? With no consistency in the group that you're calling up, it's difficult to find consistency in your play. This has been one of the big shocks with Pochettino. Now, to be completely honest with you, I've been a bit of a Pochettino skeptic. He did some great things at Tottenham. As I was saying, Sport Watcher, we'll get to the skepticism. He did some great things at Tottenham. Of course, he elevated that club. Then it soured towards the end, really badly to the point where he was sacked. Then he went to PSG and was just okay for one season. Granted, there's difficult politics at that club. He was fine. He did the bare minimum of winning the league and some other cups. Chelsea, rough start there, got better toward the end, and then he was out. At both PSG and Chelsea, he had difficulty instilling a style of play, and the guy had an entire season at each of those teams. So signing him to a national team where you get a few days here and there with your constantly changing squad, in his case, and it will be even more difficult for him to instill a style of play on this team. The USA didn't exactly have the strongest identity under Berhalter either, under Triple G, Greg, that's for sure, but with the reputation Poch brings, you'd expect more progress done there. A lot of the matches have seen the U.S. men's national team look slow, for lack of a better word. They certainly press with enthusiasm when they don't have the ball. There's more fluidity amongst the attackers as far as their positioning when they do have possession in the opponent's final third. But I do find how they advanced the ball to be a bit slow. Now, prior to the Gold Cup, I found this stat, guys. I went stat hunting. Prior to the Gold Cup, since 2010, no US team has progressed the ball up the pitch slower than Pochettino's has. And after the Gold Cup, there still wasn't exactly many answers or light bulb moments that made you think, that's what Poch is trying to do. The build up slow. It's hard to find any sort of identity. And so let's get into the friendlies then, because this is one of the things that he needs to bring during the friendlies. Saturday against South Korea, next Tuesday against Japan. These are World Cup caliber opponents, right? Opponents that can make the knockout rounds of the World Cup. I believe both of them did at the previous World Cup. South Korea and... Did South Korea? I can't remember. Japan absolutely did. We saw them advance and do quite well. Two very, very difficult opponents. And I'm a little bit split on how I feel about this because, I found myself contradicting myself at times when I was thinking about these friendlies. Yes, wins will go a long way in getting some credit in the bank, so to speak, if you're Mauricio Pochettino, but this doesn't necessarily mean convincing victories. In fact, given the squad that he selected, that shouldn't really be expected, that the USA will get very convincing victories over these two sides based on how they've played previously. As you can see, a nice little graphic here, Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, Serginho Dest for the first time playing under Mauricio Pochettino, I believe. So that'll be nice. They'll finally get to meet each other. But I don't think that losses will be considered a complete negative if he can do as we were talking about before and make his plan for a style of play completely clear to everyone. This doesn't need to be anything mind-blowing. This can quite simply be that the USA are utilizing their speed on the counterattack to dominate the midfield through their strength and physicality. At this point, I think a lot of people care less about playing beautiful, Joga Bonito type football with the US men's national team. If they come away from these matches against South Korea and Japan with a loss, but a coherent view of how Pochettino wants to play, of how the US men's national team could look at the 2026 World Cup, I think that would be acceptable for the most part. Because, losses combined with the strange squad selection adds further scrutiny. People are going to just be asking more questions about what Pochettino is trying to accomplish. People are going to be asking more questions about how has the U.S. men's national team evolved since Mauricio Pochettino, this huge name, the highest paid coach in U.S. men's national team history. How have they progressed? Has anything changed? Have they evolved in any kind of way, or are they basically stuck in the same spot? Like I was saying before, a style of play will go a very long way, and you're going to need some big, big performances out of some of your players who I see as kind of these X factor guys, right? I think that it will go a long way in Christian Pulisic having a really big performance. Christian Pulisic, of course, having a little bit of this baggage. There's a lot of talk in the media right now about, there's a rift between himself and Pochettino. They haven't talked since the Gold Cup. Like, what's going on between them? That kind of thing. I think that Christian Pulisic having a huge, huge performance will be absolutely integral. Absolutely integral. And just in general, looking past the friendlies, another player, like if we want to talk about the spine of the U.S. men's national team, another player that sort of evolved during this past Gold Cup was Chris Richards at center back. Now, that was a position that there had been some question marks. Is Chris Richards the guy? Are we going to be relying on Tim Ream until he's 67 years old? I mean, I think he's 37, 38 at this point. Are we going to be relying on him when he's, using a walker out there on the pitch? And Chris Richards in Gold Cup really, really evolved. And he became this player that can be relied upon both in his performances and as a leader. So I see him as kind of these X factor players that can make a difference. And finally, another one, again, looking ahead to the World Cup, it's got to be Tyler Adams. I think that Tyler Adams is sort of the, if you want to say, heartbeat of this U.S. men's national team. I think that he can provide the most value in the midfield. I think that he's integral when it comes to a lot of the aspects that he offers defensively, maybe a little bit less going forward, but defensively in control of matches, Adams is absolutely integral. And all this talk about these players in the World Cup, what do you say we start jumping into these predictions, right? Let's jump into these predictions of who I think will be starting for the U.S. men's national team at the 2026 World Cup. Now, first off, I want to say, just so we level set here, expectations. Formation, of course, as Mauricio Pochettino mostly, most of the time, we're going to go with a 4-2-3-1. Now we'll start with the goalkeeper. And this is a very contentious position. There's two positions that I see as very contentious. I mean, everyone will argue about every single position. That's a fact. This is, sports on the internet, right? There's going to be arguments. But the two positions that I find to be the most contentious right now, goalkeeper and striker. And we'll start with goalkeeper. And yes, I'm going to go with Matt Turner. You could go with Fries. You could go with this man, the man of many caps, Matt Turner. Now, things haven't gone incredibly well since moving to the UK. He hasn't had a ton of playing time since going over there. It just really hasn't panned out how he would have wanted. And when you're not getting that playing time, that is a bit of a worry, isn't it? Now, he has come back to New England, where it all began for him, where it all popped off for him. 4 matches, save percent of, 76.2%. That's not bad at all. 16 saves across 4 matches. It hasn't been unbelievable performances from him, but the hope is that in a place where he's comfortable and playing regularly, if that continues throughout the season, then I think that he will get back into that starting position ahead of Matt Fries, who kind of usurped him at the Gold Cup, right? But I have faith that Turner will find himself before the World Cup. Now, left back. Left back, I don't think that I'm going to surprise anybody when I say that my left back choice is, of course, Anthony Robinson. Jedi Robinson. Look, he was one of the best fullbacks in the Premier League last season. You'd expect him to continue on that trajectory this season, right? Injured at the moment, but when fit, having Robinson and the other right back who we'll get to later, the other fullback, having both of them on the pitch, double trouble is a huge, huge, huge headache for opposing teams. It really is, especially in transition, especially when they're in those wide positions, providing those crosses into the box. As you can see on the screen here, Anthony Robinson's deliveries into the box and setting up his teammates really just popped off last season. 10 assists. Like I said, I think it's safe to say that, alongside Milos Kerkez, formerly of Bournemouth, he was one of the best, if not the best, left back in the Premier League. Cucurella is up there as well. But hey, Robinson, he's starting at left back. Fantastic player. Now let's go to the center back positions. And the first one that I have for you guys is someone who I actually spoke about already as one of the X factors, one of the players that I think is super important for the US men's national team. And that is, of course, Chris Richards. Who else but him with the glorious, glorious hair and mustache combo? He really put in a great, great, great performance at the Gold Cup, after there was some scrutiny on him from certain U.S. men's national team supporters. But yes, at the Gold Cup, he was a top performer, not just in defense, not just in that back line, but just in the team in general. At Crystal Palace, he's still starting matches for Crystal Palace. He's putting in great performances, fresh off of winning that historic FA Cup when they defeated Man City, by the way. Incredible, incredible achievement from Crystal Palace. So he'll go down as a club legend for them just based off of that. He could just never do anything again at Crystal Palace, and he will be heralded as one of the legends at that club for a long, long time. He's a good leader in this side, maybe not the captain officially, but one of the leaders on the pitch, a captain in spirit, Also a pretty good pundit, I gotta say. I enjoyed watching him this summer for the Club World Cup coverage. Every time we had a little Richards on the screen, weird way of saying it, I thought he was great. It shows that his analytical mind is quite good, and that's never a bad thing for a center back, isn't it? Now, let's move to the other center back. Who's going to be pairing him? Will it be the ancient man that we spoke of, Tim Ream? Sorry. Personally, now people are going to call me a Euro snob. I'm going to go with Cameron Carter-Vickers. Partnering him, Cameron Carter-Vickers. Now, another season at Celtic for him where he's been integral to Brendan Rodgers' plans, even captained the team a few times last season. He'll be playing in the Europa League this season against some great opposition. He's close to the prime of his career, and at the end of this season, His experience will be vital in the World Cup for the US men's national team. As you can see, they're part of 17 clean sheets, winning 161 duels. He is strong, but also has the brain. I have him playing next to Chris Richards. He is my other center back. Now, do we want to see who the right back will be? I think a lot of you will have chosen this guy because, of course, I have Serginho Dest. Now, when he's not injured, because he was very injured last season, when he's not injured, I find that he's one of the more important pieces of their back line. As you can see, just 7 matches last season. That is very, very tough for him. Bad ACL injury, brutal, but he's back now. I think he had a little bit of something in preseason where he pulled something. He had some discomfort, but hey, he's in the squad. He's going to be playing against Japan and South Korea. That's going to be exciting for Pochettino to get eyes on him and for them to sort of cook something up. But anyway, does he have lapses defensively now and then? Yeah, sure. What fullback doesn't, right? Especially these guys who are wingers converted to fullbacks kind of thing. But what he offers going forward, indispensable. Like I said, having double trouble, him and Jedi Robinson on the pitch at the same time, unbelievably dangerous. And he's off to a great start with PSV this season. 2 goals and 2 assists in 4 appearances, or 5 appearances, sorry. If the strikers want to succeed, they'll need his service out there just as they do with Robinson. Now we get to jump to the midfield. Okay, this is where it gets very, very difficult, guys. Very, very difficult indeed. And the first guy that I'm going to go with, and this is a 4-2-3-1, so he's going to be playing next to someone, but he can also play in a 4-3-3 at the base of the midfield. First guy I'm going with, Tyler Adams. Now, Tyler Adams, when he's fit, because he had a bit of injury issues in his past as well, but when he's fit, for me, he's the heart of the USA's midfield. Defensively, so sound. Breaks up play incredibly well. If the US is dominating in the midfield, it's probably because of him and his reading of the game. Look, as you see, he's not one of the guys that's going to rack up goals and assists. He's doing all of the dirty work, if you want to call it that. He's doing a lot of the work that doesn't really get celebrated as much. Johnny Cardozo, he was the other guy I was sort of debating between. Might be a little bit better with his distribution, maybe get more of those assists, that kind of thing, can launch attacks, and we'll see if he improves at Atletico this season. But for me, Adams has to be on the pitch to provide cover for the back line and take part in that first phase of the attack. So, Tyler Adams, our first man in the midfield. Thank you for joining us. Now, next to him, I'm going to have none other than Weston McKennie, who is up there as one of the most talented players on this U.S. men's national team. To go to Juventus and become a player that for a while was a shoe-in starter under multiple coaches, an important piece to their midfield. That's incredibly impressive, especially at a time where people thought like, oh, there was a few moments where people thought his Juve career was done, and he got back in there. And look, again, he's another guy that's not going to get a ton of goals and assists. That's not really his role, but he can provide them. You know, he does have the knack to score a sick. Oh, he'll throw in a little bicycle kick now and then, a crazy volley from outside of the box. You know, one of those. Him arriving late is a scary thing. Arriving late in the box is a scary thing. Now, I know where's Tanner Tessman? Where's the Tanner Tessman in all of this? But like I said earlier, this is tough. This is really tough. And I can't not have Adams and McKennie out there, right? So that means who's that central attacking midfielder? Who's this final piece of that sort of midfield triumvirate? It was really tough narrowing this down, but for me, Malik Tillman, special, special player. And so I have him playing in the number 10 spot, as he did this past summer. He just moved from PSV to Bayer Leverkusen. That's a big move for him, and started his career at Leverkusen off pretty well. He got that goal against Werder Bremen, putting Leverkusen ahead. They ended up tying that, and then Ten Hag lost his job. So unlucky for him there. But he was a fairly decent performer at PSV as well. As you can see, 2 assists, 12 goals in 12 league matches. That's not bad at all. He's a pretty decent performer under Pochettino already. He had some good performances under him, playing in a better league this season, in the Champions League as well. He'll be playing against some of the elite teams, not just in Europe, but in the sport in general. So he'll be all the better for it come June of 2026. So he rounds out my midfield as we move into the attackers. Now, we're going to start on that right wing. And I have someone who I simply just do not need to defend as well. Christian Pulisic, right? The U.S. men's national team's best player, perhaps the best player in U.S. men's national team history with what he has achieved, right? He's one of those X factor players that I mentioned. He's someone who can conjure something up out of nothing. He can use that unbelievable amount of experience from the various leagues he's played in to guide the younger players in the team, to get them out of sticky situations. He's someone that the rest of the squad looks to, and I mean, rightfully so. Just look at what he did at AC Milan last season in the league: 34 matches, 9 assists, 11 goals. Those are fantastic numbers for a player that when he went to AC Milan, there were some major question marks as, oh, that failure at Chelsea, if you want to call it that. I mean, the kid won the Champions League. How's he going to do at AC Milan? He goes there in one of the best leagues in the world and kills it, becomes one of the most important players to the point where now, with the new signing of Christopher Nkunku at AC Milan, people are wondering, okay, well, how do we fit Nkunku into this AC Milan side when we have Christian Pulisic out there and Rafael Leão? He's that good at this moment. Absolutely one of the players that can win matches on his own. So let's go to the left wing. And honestly, you could interchange this guy with Christian Pulisic as far as positionally. I have Tim Weah playing on the left wing, which he has done a few times for the U.S. men's national team, amongst other positions. Pulisic is kind of better at playing a bit on the right side, in my opinion, as he does with AC Milan. So I think it's worth getting the best out of your best player in Pulisic. So we'll have him on the right for now. But that's the beauty of having Tim Weah out there, right? He can swap sides with Pulisic. And when he's on the right wing, actually, just as another side note, he and Dest can overlap. Weah providing decent cover for Dest when he wants to go forward, given Weah has played as a wingback in his career. So Tim Weah offers a ton. He was, linked up with Weston McKennie at Juventus last season. He has experience in France, in Italy, back to France now as he's at Marseille. So his experience, his ability, his speed in the counter would be indispensable to the U.S. men's national team. And finally, like I said, the other incredibly contentious and final position, the striker position. Nobody can agree upon it, but I'm going to put Ricardo Pepi in there. Poch went with Agyemang at the Gold Cup. Balogun has been used in the past, and obviously when he's in form, he's fantastic. Josh Sargent is in the mix as well. But in my opinion, when Ricardo Pepi is healthy, he stands above the rest. He has a fantastic sense for goal and finishing ability. He presses his opponents well and is absolutely tireless out of possession. He holds the ball up well. And again, he's a very strong finisher. He scored in the 2 matches that he actually played under Pochettino. But with all those injury issues, he hasn't been available often enough. But when available, for me, he's that guy. He's that guy. So that is my 11 if we want to run through it now. Again, potentially contentious, but I have Matt Turner. I believe that he can pull it off, that he can become that guy once again in this season. And then at left back, we have Anthony Robinson, Jedi Robinson. Why don't we play a 4-4-2? That's a really good question. And I think that Pochettino has actually played with that at times. But I do believe that playing a 4-2-3-1 with 2 of those central midfielders, in this case, it would have to be McKennie kind of sitting back a little bit more than perhaps he likes, or you could get Cardozo out there next to Adams, sitting back a little bit more, playing a little bit more of a counter-attacking style of football. I think that the 4-2-3-1 works in that case. You could go 4-4-2 and get 2 strikers out there. I know that some people want to do that, but I think that just knowing Pochettino and how he typically has liked to play, not to say he won't change things, typically has liked to play, I think that the 4-2-3-1 works there. So yes, Matt Turner in goal. Then we have Jedi Robinson at left back. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic player. Chris Richards and Carter Vickers, those are the guys that I have as your pairing of center backs. At right back, Serginho Dest, who everyone will be hoping and praying can stay healthy. And then, of course, in the midfield, we have Adams and McKennie, as I was just saying when speaking about the 4-4-2 versus 4-2-3-1. But I think that Adams playing back a little bit, McKennie sort of being that 8, fantastic pairing in the middle. In the center attacking midfield, the number 10 position, Malik Tillman, who did well at the Gold Cup for the most part, is doing well at Leverkusen very early in his career there. Incredibly talented, killed it for PSV last season in the Eredivisie and the Champions League. And then in the attack, on the wing, on right wing, it will surprise nobody to see Christian Pulisic out there, Captain America himself. He's a guy that you need to be playing in his favored position. Some people like him a little bit central. I think in sort of that inside right channel is where he kind of operates best. He can finish off attacks. He can kick off attacks. Tim Weah as your left winger. I almost said left back, as he's played left back, right wing, left wing, all of it. And then as your striker, Ricardo Pepi is my choice. That's my choice. I know that, like I said, it's the internet and it's sports on the internet, so everyone's going to have an opinion. Everyone's going to sort of contest it, but that is who I have gone with. And to me, that's a pretty dang good U.S. men's national team. It's not necessarily a team that I would relish playing against, so long as Pochettino gets that playing style instilled in this team. You see, coming full circle here, because this is the end, guys. That will be all. That is the end of this stream. Looking forward to this international break, as I'm sure you are too, or maybe you're dreading watching these friendlies, depending on how you feel, if you feel optimistic or not about the U.S. men's national team. But regardless, I want to thank you for joining me here today. I appreciate it, and keep it locked on Bleacher Report for more streams from across the world of sports. Okay, I'm Adrian. Take care, guys.